Welcome everyone to a new episode of Xpirit Talks. Today we're going to talk about secure software development, DevSecOps, how to build more secure software. Today we have three guests, Arjan, Michiel, Rob, and they're experts on security and building software. So we're going to talk about how can we build better software and make teams really embrace this security aspect as part of building their software. So as consultants, we often visit a lot of companies. We see a lot of the same things, different silos, people building the software, and with DevOps they actually took on a larger part of not only doing the development and throwing it over the wall towards operation, but actually building software and actually running it in production. But security is quite often still a silo. And that really doesn't make sense, right? Because we want to go faster and faster, and security risks are becoming more and more threats. In the news you read it constantly about hacks, about all kinds of attacks on companies. So it's really an important thing to take into account. So what should companies do to break down these silos? How can we really embrace this security part as part of DevOps? Rob, do you have an idea?
That's always a good question. For me, it starts indeed with awareness, and that's why people start calling it DevSecOps, just to be more aware of there's a security part in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
For us as DevOps consultants, we usually say, well, it's part of my DevOps lifecycle.
Yeah.
It's a part, but then there's not enough focus on there. So that's why usually you start with making people aware. These are the types of attacks that we see, and these are the things that happen inside your software. And go from there. Start with education.
Yeah. So DevOps should already include security, right? That's in the nature of doing DevOps. Security should already be in there. But yeah, we call it DevSecOps, especially when we try to emphasize the security aspect. So awareness. What kind of things are? How can we make engineers be more aware of the things that could go wrong? What's a good starting point? Do you have?
I think it's a tricky part because you mentioned DevSecOps. Dev we all know. Ops, we're going there, and a lot of people know how to do ops. But security, I think a lot of people don't know what security is and how it should operate. So awareness is one thing, and you need to be more security aware. But how to get the knowledge to be security aware. And what you normally see with customers, they have one, maybe two people in a team somewhere centralized, like the column you mentioned, that tell you a little bit how to do security. And then they're gone because they're only two people. And then you need to figure it out as a developer and need to do your thing. And then you get audited at the end.
Yeah.
So you have that big waterfall thing called security. Then you do your whole agile thing, DevOps. And then you're back at a security audit. So the thing is, it's not part of your whole life cycle, and somehow you miss the knowledge. So one of the things, it's awareness, but it's also training, and getting people to know what kind of tools they need to use, what kind of techniques they need to apply to, and what kind of threats there are, what kind of risk you need to mitigate.
It starts there, right? Like what kind of threats are we exposed to as building our application?
And the problem is it's not only application, it's also the infrastructure. So we expect people not only to know the cross-site scripting problems and a SQL injection attack, but they also need to know how a Kubernetes cluster is secure.
Yeah, when I talk about application, I always include infrastructure as well, because that's my nature of building cloud native applications. Every part of your application, it's the infrastructure and the code together is the application. But
that's how it should be, but I've seen a lot of people think that's not really my domain. I know a lot about the code and I do all the things to make that secure, but there you have your own.
Yeah, you mentioned cross-site scripting, SQL injection. So OWASP Top 10, it's a list of common vulnerabilities that people should be aware of, that should at least
It's a long,
think about.
Yeah, it's a long time in the industry. You can look it up. You can have a lot of mitigations, risks that you can actually go through and see how you can mitigate it. Some of them are automated, so you can actually scan your code and do stuff based on alerts that you get. But still, you need to have common sense and know how to mitigate those things.
Yeah, and the weird part is that we're still explaining that at customers that this is could be a starting point of at least thinking more of a defensive way, or maybe an offensive way, depends on how you use it, on the basics like the OWASP 10. And that's only concerning your application. We're not even talking about the rest yet.
Yeah.
Those things that are common for us, it's our bread and butter, so to say. This is how you should do things inside of your application.
And the
Do
nice
not
thing
trust
you
user
need-
input. It's super important.
Yeah. And the thing is, you need to be doing it continuously.
Yeah.
I have a team that says, yeah, we are aware of it, and every month we do a check.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we release
We
several
release
times a
multiple
day.
times, and you have risks that pop up every day, so you're too late already.
Mhm.
So how to handle that? They need to automate it. Automate scanning, automate all the stuff that is being rolled out and validate.
So what are first steps to, let's say we are aware, we have looked through OWASP and we could do a scan,
Yeah.
and well, that's, how would teams approach this? How would you take the
There are
first
good tools
steps?
to actually validate your code on already on compile time. Like SonarCube's already doing some stuff. Probably you know of GitHub, a couple of tools.
CodeQL now scans
Yeah.
with OWASP 10 rules in there as well that they use machine learning for.
Yeah, and you can
Mhm.
create your
You
own
can use
custom rules.
the ZOP container still. That's still available and still works.
Yeah.
That's usually what I try to do at my customer is start with an awareness part and then do a proof of concept somewhere. Do a training, have something in there, and even if you do file a new project and run a scan on it, you will find things in there. So
Yeah.
either cross-site scripting issues or something with dependencies that you're pulling in that are not safe anymore.
Yeah.
Start there and create awareness, build it up, because if you start enabling these kinds of features on your software, you will find lots of things.
Yeah, and it starts off with your own code. So you start scanning your own code and you will find stuff.
Yeah.
Chances are, if
Yeah.
you don't do any scanning currently, when you run it for the first time, you will bump into a lot of things. And what I often see, well, it's quite a shock when you do the scan for the first time. Whoa, you get hundreds or maybe thousands of issues, depending on the size of your landscape or application.
Yeah.
And then that's the
Well,
we
I
can
think
we
the
can all
biggest risk,
start
what Rob
fixing.
already mentioned, it's when you do a file new project, you get a lot of dependencies in. So
Yeah.
a lot of the code you mentioned that it's actually not yours.
Mhm.
It's somebody else's code, and if you don't manage that, handle it, then you already have vulnerabilities.
Yeah, so I think when you look at a modern project, over 90% of the
Yeah.
of your application is not your own code.
Easily.
Everyone's
Everything
downloading packages, and the
yeah.
packages use packages, and those packages use packages. So
Yeah, but the assumption is that if I use a package, it's safe because I know the maker, right? It's Microsoft, so what could go
Mhm.
wrong?
yeah,
Yeah, you hope that it is Microsoft. 'Cause
Yeah.
That's another
Yeah,
thing. you
yeah,
need
Well,
to
of
that's
course.
that's the assumption, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you see where the package ecosystems are these days, with actually doing proper package signing and making sure that you can do attestation of who created this one, where, and can I do a
Yeah.
reproducible build on that? And we're not even there as an industry yet.
No.
So
Yeah.
that's what we try to build on top of with our own application. But it is really turtles all the way down. If there's one issue somewhere in one of the package chains that you use, your application might have it as well.
I recently saw something on Twitter. There was a question.
on the
If you
NuGet
see,
package.
if you see a blue check mark on a NuGet package, what does it tell you?
Yeah.
And even I don't know. It's a reserved name. Is it an approved package? Is it signed?
Yeah.
No clue.
They're heavily investing in that right now. But
Yeah.
it's still not there yet. So you can sign on NuGet, you can do some attestation, you can pin certain versions now. It's really going fast in the last couple of months.
But it's even I really like that thread on Twitter. Like, does it mean the package is safe? No, it doesn't mean that. It's like it has some. It has to do something with the namespace. I think it was really
Yeah, you can reserve namespaces.
not important thing, but when you open the website, you see this package and it has this nice
Yeah.
check next to it.
Yeah.
They're like, this one's ready to go, right?
But the same applies to the Azure DevOps Marketplace or to the
Yes.
GitHub Actions Marketplace.
Mhm.
You don't know.
Yeah, but that's even a step further, right?
Yeah.
That's outside of your application. Let's talk about your application first and the risks that you have there. So you have your own application code. You have all the packages, and well, with scanning, you should of course scan all of them. Not only your own code, but also the packages and seeing what known vulnerabilities are, and include that in your process.
Yeah, and do something with it. because just enabling the tooling and saying
Yeah. So
it's a red flag. But
now
you
we
need
have
to fix
1,000
it.
warnings, and
Yeah.
tomorrow we have 1,010.
And I got 10 vulnerability packages. That's cool. Tomorrow I've got 12, and then in about
But
a week
that's
I've
where-
got 1,000.
That's where GitHub currently is going. You can enable it, and you get a lot of alerts that there are vulnerabilities inside of the dependencies that you use. And the guidance there is start then with incorporating it in your pull request.
Yes.
Whenever somebody updates a package or pulls in a new package and that has a vulnerability, stop the pull request there and start fixing it.
Yeah.
And then you can slowly start retroactively fixing all the other stuff that you have. But if you enable the feature, you will get a lot of notifications.
Mm-hmm.
Start with the new stuff that you're pulling in after that.
But that's okay. That's if you include new packages.
Yeah.
But there's also, well, you probably already have a lot of packages, and they get new versions, and you need to update them as well, because in the current versions there are probably unknown vulnerabilities that
Yeah.
become known vulnerabilities, and then
Yes.
they will fix it, and you need to update them as well. I think
Yeah.
that's often, well, it looks quite easy, right? There's all kind of tools, like Dependabot and
Keep
Renovate.
Renovate,
Renovate.
those kind of tools that help you update the packages. But that's only from the outside. It looks easy. Okay, they'll always get the newest packages, but these packages also use other packages
Yeah.
that might have known vulnerabilities. And
So
how do you
do you quickly update to be safe, or do you assess it, or do you
But how
wait
can
for
you-
certain version?
how can you update packages that your packages use? You
Yeah.
can't update those underlying packages. It
It
might break.
depends
the
on the ecosystem. They're building something now in NuGet where you can pin a version saying I want to use Newtonsoft 13 always. I don't
Mhm.
care if a sub package of my package uses 12. It uses 13 anyway.
Yeah,
You
but
can
that
start doing
might-
those things.
That might
It might break things,
things.
Yes.
but it depends on the ecosystem.
It will break things. Yes.
Yeah.
You can do the same thing for NPM,
Mhm.
but it might break things. So you need to test and verify.
Yeah.
And even when you update one of those packages through a pull request, you can validate that you're not pulling in anything that has a known vulnerability in there.
Yeah.
So that's usually start there at least. Instead of saying we have 1,000 issues found from existing vulnerabilities, we need to fix them. Yes, start with the high stuff, for example, but then also start doing it for the new stuff that you're pulling into a pull request.
Yeah, so it's not that easy to, and that we're only talking about just scanning your code,
Yeah.
the packages. What I like to do as well at customers is just do some credential scanning. Quite often,
Fine stuff.
Most of the time.
when you do an initial scan on a Git repo, or like all the Git repos within a company, just scan them for credentials. You find a bunch of them,
Yeah.
like credentials to deploy stuff to production environments, or connection strings to databases.
Config files. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
It's a super hard problem to fix because this has happened to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
I still remember that day when I got an email from our cloud provider that says, you have leaked your production database connection string. You're screwed. We've revoked it for you and help you. That's at least already an improvement, but even getting there as a enterprise, it's very hard to do.
But then you just update your credentials. You don't put them in source control anymore. But it's still, you're not using, probably not using the best way to connect to that database. You could do it in safer ways, like using managed identities
yeah.
or those.
You shouldn't have any credentials, and if you have, then you need to have a procedure to actually rotate them in,
Yeah.
Yeah.
in a scheduled way every X weeks, etc. And actually
Well-
have alerts on them if you're not doing it.
But we're still explaining that at customers that you should be doing that.
Yeah.
It's already something if they're already using
Mhm.
something like Keyvault. But then going to the next step to manage identity is already a new
Yeah.
epiphany for them.
But what I'm a bit of afraid for is that, like, it's so much stuff. As a developer, how does that fit in a developer's brain, right? That's
I think a lot of stuff is not enabled by default, like that Renovate or
Mhm.
Newkeeper dependent bot. You need to enable it.
Yeah.
And you need to be aware that you need to enable it.
Yeah.
And it begins, you need to do vulnerability scanning. A lot of people don't know what it is, how to do it, what kind of tools you have. So most of the time it's something that the company needs to push towards, like a cloud team saying you need to have it enabled on all your repositories. But it's hard to validate, hard to check if you're doing it right.
yeah. Well, the problem is it's not an issue until
it is an issue.
until it
Yeah.
is an issue, and then it's a really
And
big
you're right.
issue.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard to.
and they often are afraid to update because if we update this package, then everything breaks.
Mm-hmm.
So we
But-
don't update. That's safe.
Yeah, and the product owner is pushing for new features. So
Yeah, we need more features.
you need to balance it. Like, I often see these kind of things push down the backlog over and over again because there's more important things coming up until
Yeah. But there's
They
also
get hacked,
discussion. It's a value if you build features, but there is also a negative value if you lose data or have bad publicity, and that's always a good argument also to bring forward. Outline the risks, and if somebody is willing to accept the risks.
Yeah.
And if you put it like that, then the product owner will probably say no.
Yeah, so the product owner should be responsible for far more than
Yeah.
just
Yeah, it
So
should be
it's not-
visible. Huh?
But the awareness is not only developers, right? It's also team managers, product owners, and everybody around it.
so scanning can help there as well.
Yes.
So yeah, at least you have a chart like that's going up and up and up. And it's like, yeah, this red figure here, it's becoming bigger.
Yeah.
We need to fix it.
And the whole point there is to be in control. And that is really where the discussion with somebody like a CISO, for example, really helps because they have the notion that we need to be in control. And if we don't know, then we're not in control.
Mm-hmm.
So start with getting me at least a report that says these are the dependencies that we use.
Yeah. So I think they call it a bill of materials, right? Software bill of materials. So actually know what's in your software.
Yeah.
No.
What kind of tools and things do we actually
And
use?
that's usually the eye opener that I use. File new project, scan for your dependencies, and I say these are the 80 dependencies that you're directly dependent on because you use a template. And these are the other 800 dependencies that are dependencies of your dependencies that you're also using, but you're not aware of. And if anywhere along that chain an issue happens, you might have an issue in your application. That's how you can create awareness.
And it also works the other way around, right? If you delete stuff from your code, then scan if you still need all the packages.
Yeah.
I think Visual Studio has that new cool feature that says remove all not needed dependencies, which is
It really cuts down.
Yeah.
on
It's
the-
also really nice,
instead of dragging everything. in.
especially when you're working with legacy and stuff that's being used year over years. Well, everyone adds packages, but how often do you remove a package? You don't. If you don't know all the code that's in there, you
don't wanna
like
take the
why
risk.
why would I
Yeah,
really
exactly.
remove
Yeah.
this package? Yeah.
And those are the nice developments that we see now. GitHub is building that as well, that they are now aware of what percentage of the package that you're pulling in you're actually using. If you're not calling it, they can see that at compile time, then they can at least alert you or cut down on the noise of the alert saying, well, there's an issue in that specific package, but you're not using it right now. And from there, really, the next step comes from, all right, we have a vulnerability inside of a package. Are we vulnerable at all? And maybe we can trim that down and shake the whole code tree to just remove that code.
Maybe the awareness can also really help in not using a dependency for everything. Right? It is the famous pad left that broke the internet. Why do you actually need a package? You will probably get it anyways because, well, other libraries that you use it.
Yeah.
But if you write your own code, do you actually need something externally to do these trivial things?
Not always that bad to have that code inside your own system. A little bit of duplication or your own.
Yeah, especially if it's
Sense
like
of
one line of code.
Yeah.
I wouldn't
Get a
I
package
wouldn't
in, you
even
need to
call it
update, there
a
is
code
risk in there.
duplication.
Yeah.
Like we're not having a if statement package either, right?
No.
So it's just part of
It
your
is
code.
even and insult functions. Yeah.
But the hard part there was we were not pulling in a package that uses pad left.
No,
We were using a package that uses packages that uses packages that uses pad left.
yeah. So that's why I said you'll probably get it
Yeah.
anyways,
Yeah.
even if you don't want it. But also awareness, like if you're building software, use packages where they really help you,
Yeah.
and don't do it for the trivial stuff. And if the same people that build the packages have the same mindset, then these really small packages will maybe hopefully disappear someday. in
Yeah, the
20
drawback
years.
is nowadays the tools allow you actually to get it easier to get packages in.
Mhm.
If you use ReSharp, it will automatically suggest to you, hey, let's download this NuGet package because you probably want to have this functionality in there. So we're moving to a scenario that you have more packages. Well, actually, I think you should have less.
But that's also what we keep telling developers, right? You're not reinventing the wheel. Use a package because it's already there.
Yeah.
And that's the hard
Without
thing.
scanning what's in there.
Yeah,
It's,
that's the part of you need to be aware, and that comes with maturity and knowing that this could happen.
Yeah.
So it starts with awareness again of why are you pulling in a package and why do we need it? And do we need that 2 megabytes of disk space? Do we actually use it? Or do we have one call in here that makes it easier for us?
And also the awareness that when you scan for a package, what kind of checks do you do? Are you going to browse to all the code? Are you looking at the maturity of something? Is it being used for 7 years? Is that more important than another package?
That's very hard.
Maybe contributors.
Yeah,
last update tells you a lot.
GitHub tries to indicate a little bit with some sort of health of the package, of the repository.
So initial thing teams could do is just start scanning their repositories to at least get a number or a feeling like where are we at.
Yeah.
So because that gives them an initial talking point also to CISOs, to product owners, to anyone outside the engineering team, but also having the discussion within the engineering team. So with like, what should we do with this number, which is maybe 10, maybe 10,000, or anything in between. And from there on, you can start, taking actions on it.
Try to lower the number.
And that is where
come up with a plan.
That is where the new generation comes in, that they actually scan to see if you're using that part of the code. So if the vulnerability is in a part of the library that you're not using entirely, then they can skip that entire alert so that you can focus on the things that are actually vulnerabilities inside of your code base.
Let's see how you're impacted, if you're impacted.
That will really cut down on the noise.
And if you're looking at the packages, also look at the licenses. I think it's also very important to know that you're not introducing licenses that actually should force you to open source your whole software system. I think a lot of people are not really aware of the license structure because it's complex, difficult, and that you say, oh, there's a nice package that added.
Yeah, especially because it's all just on GitHub or NuGet or NPM.
And licenses change sometimes.
That's even more tricky. The stuff that you have a new version, they introduce a new license. You just
you're not aware. You're not looking at it. You update the thing.
But also, mostly the developers don't care.
Yeah,
they're there to build new functionality, and there's an update, so pull it in because we have heard somewhere that you should always have the latest versions. At least try to keep up to date.
It's more a legal thing that you need to have the right version.
And that's of course more and more of types of supply chain attacks that we see. Hostile takes over of a package where they just inject some malicious code in there, and everybody starts updating to the latest version, and now my attack was successful.
And you think it's just a patch update, so it should be fine.
So that's one part. Like, okay, we can scan our application. We know that we can introduce packages that might be vulnerable. But there's also a mindset of like assuming breach. Like, if there's stuff happening, how can we make sure that the blast radius is as small as possible? So maybe our build server is infected, so all the applications that are built on there are exposed, or do we clean after each build so only this current build is infected, right? So all those kind of awareness things are there as well. Assuming that the server that you're building on is breached.
What you see with a lot of enterprises, they have a pool of build servers that they have internally hosted, and everybody's using those build servers. Everybody's installing stuff on those build servers because they need it. And then a couple of people have admin rights because it was easy, and suddenly you have software running on those things.
And that should be open to the internet, right? Because
Although
it cannot download the packages.
But there are also certificates and secrets in there because they also need to deploy to production,
and they're probably doing replays. So they set the secret in a config file. The config file is uploaded. There you have all your secrets.
So there's a lot of attack factors. Like, where can you be attacked? Like in the code itself, in the package you use, in the build pipeline, in
the infrastructure you use.
In the infrastructure, and the people behind the keyboard. So all these aspects, we should also, how do we create awareness around that? Is that we looked at like the vulnerabilities in your code with code scanning. How do we create more awareness with the whole thing?
Well, if you look at your production environment, I think there are already good tools in, for example, Azure, security monitoring, a security center. That It gives a lot of nice insight of what your current state is, and
Yeah.
can also alert you on a very intelligent level of what is happening. I think you can also do it largely before you actually deploy. You have tooling that will validate your infrastructure code. Are
Yeah.
you deploying really secure stuff? Are you deploying storage accounts which are open to the internet, or still
Yeah.
using TLS 1.0? So you can do static analysis over these things.
Yeah, that's Azure does a great thing on based on infrastructure
Yeah.
level.
But the hard part is already telling people that is there.
Yeah, it's hard to find.
Yeah.
I think Microsoft nowadays do a little pop-up. Are you aware there is a security center? Because not a lot of people are looking at it.
Yeah, but then still, they could enable the free version for everyone, or
Yeah.
that's.
It's expensive,
but it's
indeed,
still the paid version gives you a lot more information.
Yeah.
But that adds up if you have a lot of different services. It comes with a cost as well, right? And cost for security. Well, a lot of these security products are quite pricey, of course, but I think if you compare it to the cost
risk
of
and the
a
cost,
breach
yeah.
of an
Being
attack.
hacked might be a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can explain it with the whole shift left movement that we've always advocated in DevOps. The earlier you find a bug, the cheaper it is. That also goes for a vulnerability and
Yes.
even being hacked in the end.
Yeah.
And there are stats in there. I think the State of DevOps report gives some of that information as well. It was in what is it? State of the Octoverse, they have that as well. Numbers on how much a breach cost on average.
Mhm.
I think it was like something like $1 million for an average organization.
Yeah, I think
Just in
average like
damages.
10% of the
It's big, yeah.
company yearly revenue or something. That's the average size. That's quite large.
Yeah, it also shows very nice how long it takes to actually fix stuff. So to able to detect it, but then also to make a fix, to apply the fix, and actually communicate that fix around.
And
before you
knowing
actually
where
start
you
updating.
actually need to make those fixes. That's
Yeah.
what I like about Dependabot, for example. It doesn't only say you have this vulnerability in that application. There's a tab there where you can see which other applications in my ecosystem have the same issue.
Yeah.
And that's usually the scary part. And that's where the CISO usually comes in. That says, we have Log4j, what is happening? Do we have that inside of our company? And well, then the question is, do we have that and where? And can we find all instances? And then can we update it?
Mm-hmm.
So those tools really help. But for me, it starts with awareness. And I think you need to create awareness across all those different steps in the process. It starts with your own code. We still need to explain the OWASP 10. Then you can go into dependency. You can also do infrastructure scanning. You can do hosting scanning. And then you probably need to circle back to, hey, we have a certificate between the application server and the database server. But are you actually validating that that's a valid certificate of ourselves?
But
And
in
that-
the end, then we also come to threat modeling.
That's where I was going
thinking
to.
about the idea of like what possible threats are there.
Yeah.
And then immediately the next step, which one has the highest criticality? Because
Mhm.
that's where you actually start.
Yeah.
But you can only do that if you start to understand what are the threats and how did we get here. And it starts with awareness, training, all those steps again. And then you end up at threat modeling and saying, these are the threats which have the highest likability of this could be happening.
Yeah.
And start there to start improving.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
nice tool from Microsoft, the Microsoft Threat Modeling for Stride, that allows you to draw on the whole architecture of your system. So you indicate you have a storage account, have a web app, and then you indicate it's using HTTPS and it's using this kind of authentication. And if you don't have those features, it will give you points. Say, okay, you need to do something about this.
Yeah.
And then you can sort those scores and actually see what your attack plan is.
Yeah, so threat modeling should be something you do really early on, but then the problem is that you have the awareness and the knowledge of actually knowing what risks are there or what could go wrong.
It's a continuous process.
Yeah.
It's not waterfall, so you cannot
No,
make an
I
already in
agree.
design and then do the threat modeling. You do part of it, but you should do this continuously.
Mhm.
And then have the tools enabled to make sure that you're doing the right stuff as well. But indeed, constantly look at, do we introduce new risk? Do we add additional complexity and vulnerabilities here?
And
That is-
start talking on those terms as well. If you update a dependency, you should talk about, are we willing to take on the risk of this new version?
Yeah.
Because
Mhm.
that sharpens the mind of how are we looking at this update. And
Yeah.
then you'll go through what are the actual changes being brought in. Is there a new committer on that repository, for example, that hasn't committed ever before? Well, then definitely make sure that you check what they are doing as well.
Yeah.
Because that's how the attacks happen, of course.
Yeah, and the people side is something I think we should strive for really zero trust. So that's also verifying everything, right? So hey, it's a new committer. Should we verify that it was actually this person, and do we trust that person verifying everything.
So with open source packages, you don't know who's behind it.
Yeah.
And if they are not signing their commits, you have no clue even to see is this person really the one that signed it or did the actual commit.
But they also just fly under the radar for 3 months and then they inject a vulnerability somewhere down the line.
Yeah. So
And
it
that's
looks
very hard.
looks a valid contributor because he already did a couple of fixes, etc.
Yeah.
Suddenly he does his nice injection.
Yeah.
So then you need to validate everything and that becomes a lot of work.
Yeah.
So the more you
And
can
high
automate,
skilled, because can you scan a whole base and commits and know all
Yeah.
the different risks?
Yeah.
You need tooling for that.
So we're all already out of time. So a lot of things that people need to be aware of. A lot of things that developers need to learn about and really get into their process, into their feedback cycle of building software. And what are all the things that we need to take into account? So our message here is really start on your projects or when you're building a product, start scanning stuff so you at least be aware of all the things that might happen and as a team discuss what might be the threats that are involved in building our application, from the code side to packages, but also permissions that humans have. Can you access production, alter stuff there manually? All those different aspects, take them into account and discuss them within your team, maybe backed up with tools to in the end build a better product. And it's, as you said, a continuous thing.
Yeah.
So you don't do this once. It's something that you should be in the back of your head all the time when building a software.
it should be in lots of steps inside of your process. So
Yep.
if you do DevOps, then you have a lot of steps in your process, include them and every step where you can. Do the shift left there and automate as much as you can.
Okay, so with that, we're going to end up and hopefully see you next time. Bye bye.